Today, we're talking about the most important step in any drawing, the step that can make or break your art, and too many artists are skipping this. If you think that I am about to start talking about color selection or perfecting those tiny details, you are not alone. This is where most artists and most online educators are focusing their time. But the truth is that none of that matters if you ignore your shadows. Without a solid shadow shape block-in, your drawings will never have the depth and the impact that they are capable of. I have been teaching art for decades, and I've noticed that when my students put in that extra effort to really master shadows, they experience huge breakthroughs. If you're ready for your breakthrough, keep watching, because in this video, I'm going to show you how to use shadows throughout every step of your drawing, and I'll be sharing a resource that you can begin using immediately to help you master these skills. Before I ever put pencil to paper, I always take some time to intentionally select a good photo reference. If your photo reference doesn't have clearly defined shadow shapes, it is impossible to practice this skill. I'm not going to go into detail on how to exactly pick your photo reference because I just made a video on that topic, and I'll link it down in the video description and at the end of this video. For this portrait, I began with a light structural sketch. My number one rule for drawing, no matter what the subject, is to work from general to specific. I started with broad, simple shapes to establish proportions and placement. Then I gradually added more specificity and more pencil pressure. Even though I'm not shading yet, I'm already thinking about value. I study the darkest areas in my photo reference, what we call shadow shapes, and I mark their boundaries in my drawing. This is very different from the usual approach of outlining the eyes or the lips, but with practice, shifting from drawing details to drawing shadows leads to more accurate, better structured drawings. Notice how the features are emerging from the face just by focusing on drawing the shadow shapes. I know it's tempting to dive into a drawing and do the outline of the eye or the outline of the nose, maybe even following a pattern that we've memorized in the past. But this doesn't take into account the specific lighting situation that you're working in. Using the shadow shape approach helps you establish structure and gives you a framework to begin to add your shadow shapes from the very beginning. Having this shadow shape on the right side of the photograph, on the side of the head, is actually super helpful in getting the head at that 3/4 angle. This can be a tricky angle for a lot of artists, but if I draw that shape and make sure the shape is the right width, then I am going to have a head that looks like it is perfectly positioned in space. For the initial layout, I used a light fast pencil because it holds a sharp point and is great for sketching with. But from here on out, I'll be using my 24 set of Derwent drawing pencils. While the topics that I discuss in this video could be executed with any set of colored pencils, what I really like about this particular curated set of colors is that there aren't so many colors that you fall into that analysis paralysis where there has to be a right option, but there's too many options. This set of pencils is great for portraits, landscapes, and wildlife, and it offers a nice tight set of colors, but that has tons of harmony and interest in it. I chose a neutral, warm brown, sepia red, and I dove back into my drawing, continuing right where I left off, which was with that careful analysis of my proportions and shadow shapes. Once I'm confident with those proportions, I use the same pencil to begin to block in my value. During this block-in phase, I'm only using one color, and that's intentional. It keeps things simple and it forces me to focus on value and keeps me from getting distracted by color before I have that really strong foundation in place. By the end of this step, with all the shadow shapes lightly mapped in, my drawing is essentially separated into just two values, the white of the paper and that sepia red. By the time I finished this block-in, I'd spent about 20 minutes on this drawing, including that initial sketch. Some artists might have half of an eye rendered in that time, but this approach gives me a roadmap for the entire drawing. I can already see how the light and dark are organized, the proportions are accurate, and a three-dimensionality is beginning to emerge. That's a much stronger foundation than perfecting one eye and hoping that the other one ends up in the right place later on. Of course, there's often a gap between knowing shadows are important and being able to see them clearly, let alone draw them accurately. And that's exactly why I created a quick sketchbook exercise called Simplifying Shadows. You'll find a link to the free project guide down in the video description. Download it, print it out, Paste it in your sketchbook and begin practicing this exercise on repeat. This is honestly one of the best ways to train your eye to see shadow shapes clearly and train your hand to draw them accurately. And you're going to notice improvements in your artwork right away. You may not have seen the shadows first approach before, but that isn't because it's new. Organizing values before diving in with color has been the foundation of drawing and painting for centuries. It's how masters like Leonardo, Rembrandt, and Sargent thought about their work, and it's still the way that students are trained in classical ateliers today. Unfortunately, traditional drawing has become less emphasized in many art communities, especially in our learning space online with colored pencil artists, and even in some academic universities. Let me know down in the comments if you are familiar with traditional drawing, if you're curious and interested in learning more, or if you have any theories about why nobody seems to be talking about and emphasizing this anymore. I've been layering in more colors for a little while now, and I bet you can already see how impactful it was to organize those values early on. For me, one of the biggest benefits of this approach is that it allows me to focus on one part of the drawing at a time. When I start with the line drawing, I'm only thinking about proportion and placement. Then, as I study the value, I'm able to see how the light shapes interact with the darker shapes, and I'm using just one colored pencil for this. Now, once the structure is in place, I can turn my attention fully to color without worrying about whether the eyes are aligned correctly or if the mouth is in the right spot. That foundation is already set, and now I get to joyfully jump in and explore and play with color. The separation of steps makes the process far less overwhelming and much more enjoyable. Many artists find it freeing because they don't have to juggle accuracy, value, and color all at once. Another huge benefit of this approach is the opportunity to use glazing. Because colored pencils are naturally transparent, the underpainting continues to show through the layers of color. This transparency is what makes glazing possible. When I talk about glazing with colored pencils, it just means that I'm applying a light, thin layer of color over something else. When I do this over this initial value structure, I'm able to shift the hue or the temperature in an area without losing the form and the shading that I've already built. In other words, your value map continues to do its job underneath, while the added color changes affect the overall mood, emotion, and the way that the drawing is perceived. Now, as I finish up this sketch, let's talk about how you can adapt this technique for different styles, subjects, and materials, and what it will end up doing for your artistic growth. Obviously, I'm using colored pencils here, but a shadows first approach works with almost any medium. I first learned it as a teenager when I was studying traditional oil painting, and it has stayed with me ever since. Whether I'm working with pastels, watercolor, graphite, or even ink, starting with shadow shapes gives me a clear structure and confidence. With loose media like watercolor, I found shadows matter even more. They hold this structure in place so that the rest of the painting can stay playful. This approach isn't just about one drawing. Over time, it's going to reshape the way that you see. You're going to start recognizing shadow shapes in everything around you. Your drawings will feel more solid and accurate, your likeness and portraits will improve, and you'll gain more control over how your values and composition guide the viewer's eye. And because your foundations are stronger, you're going to feel freer to experiment with your style and color, knowing that the structure is always going to hold everything together. As I mentioned earlier, a great place to start is with my Simplifying Shadows guide. It's a free printable project that walks you through a quick 5-minute drill in your sketchbook. Once you're comfortable with that, you can build up to single color drawings, either with graphite or a single colored pencil, that begin with the shadows before you add in the detail and the rendering. After you have a few of these drawings under your belt, you're going to be able to dive confidently in with color. I didn't master this on my own, and you don't have to either. Structured lessons and feedback can save you years of trial and error. If you're interested in going deeper, I'll link information below about my courses, including the Color Lab, which is a cohort-based program that includes 6 personalized critiques. Now that you understand the importance of this approach, you can check out this video next, where I show you 3 more portraits where I use this same shadows first approach with the Derwent Drawing 24 set. Or maybe you want to check out this video where I show you how to select the perfect photo reference so that you're set up for success for your next Shadows First drawing.